Growing up in the 1970s, my parents hired a maid. This was a common thing. Black women took the bus to the suburbs. They donned white maid uniforms and worked for upper-middle-class white families. Becky had been with the family since the early 1960s. She worked for my grandparents as well. I'd often see my grandfather waiting for Becky at the corner bus stop when I was riding to school in the morning. Becky was truly part of our family. She worked for my grandparents 2 days a week and for us 2 days a week. I was always a little jealous of her third family where she worked that other day. I didn't know them but felt like Becky belonged to me. My name is Rebecca. I was supposed to be called Becky, but when our Becky came to work for us it would have been too confusing, so I was always Rebecca. Becky was a kind, gentle soul. She always put candy under our pillows. She cleaned our rooms, and if she found coins or money in our clothes she ironed the bills and stacked the coins in a neat pile on our dresser. At Christmas time she gave me and my sister gifts. She was so sweet and thoughtful. She loved us. Becky and her adult nieces Linda and Sylvia babysat us when my parents were on vacation. I was interested to see where Becky lived, and one day my mother took us downtown to her apartment. It was nice, a place where elderly people lived. A safe building. She lived up high, maybe on the 10th floor. What struck me was she had every single school photo of me and my 2 sisters framed and hanging on the wall. Like 20 or so school pictures of these white kids from the suburbs. We really were her family. My parents separated when I was 14, almost 15. My mother was absolutely despondent. She cried all the time. Becky, obviously concerned for me and my sisters, confided to us that her husband had left her many years prior. She identified with my mother. Becky took care of my mother, comforting her. It must have been hard for Becky to see our family dissolve this way. My grandfather, the one at the bus stop, had died the previous fall and we were still in mourning over that. My mom's mom had died the previous August. So my mother was really in a bad state of mind. Becky was our rock, someone who arrived twice a week to keep our home running. Then the unthinkable happened. In the summer of 1980, we returned home from summer camp. My mother told my sister to tell Becky that lunch was ready. My little sister, 11 at the time, came into the kitchen and said Becky is asleep with her eyes open. Mom and I just shot each other a knowing look. Mom ran downstairs to Becky while I dialed 0. There was number 911 at the time. The paramedics took her to a hospital. She died later that day from a stroke. We weren't allowed to see her in the hospital. We followed the ambulance, because we weren't family. But yes, we were. Becky spent more time with us than her real family. I saw her daughter and a few other family members behind the glass. That was as close as we were allowed to her room. She was really brain dead by the time she went to the hospital. I saw the paramedics try to revive her in our family room. She basically died in our home. Why this long story, you ask? I want you to have some background. Mom finally started going out trying to meet men. One night out of every weekend I had to babysit my little sister. My older sister moved out at 18. I wasn't happy about this because I was in high school and wanted to be with my friends. While I was babysitting, I'd hear noises upstairs. I'd run upstairs. Our dog would be asleep on the sofa and my little sister was fast asleep in her bed, but I swore I'd hear footsteps. This kept happening and I'd tell my mother, but she didn't believe me. My mother and father reconciled briefly. He moved back in. I wasn't happy about it. He had hurt my mother by cheating on her. One night, while Dad was there, I heard this weird wailing. I thought it was the neighborhood fox, who routinely wailed at the moon, or was crying for its pups. But this sound was closer. I thought maybe the fox was on the side of the house by the woods. As I tried to lift up my roller blind, I could hear this wailing. It was coming from above my head, the attic. I got in bed too afraid to tell my skeptical mother. I knew she wouldn't believe me. At breakfast, Dad said, "Did anyone hear that weird noise last night?" I said yes. I wasn't crazy. There was a weird noise. Dad said it was coming from the attic. He set animal traps up there, but there weren't any animals in the attic. Then Dad and Mom split up for good. I'd still hear the footsteps when I was alone in the house. Years went by. I moved out and got married. In 1992 I separated from my husband and moved in with my mother. My mother went to Florida for the winter and I was alone in the house. I started dating. One day in the family room downstairs, my boyfriend said, "What in the heck is that?" He heard footsteps. I was immune to them at this point. I said, "I think it's Becky. She died in this house. She loved us. If it is her, she's here to watch over us." A couple weeks went by. My boyfriend and I were in the living room having a romantic date by the fire. The lights were off. There was just the light of the fire. He went upstairs to use the bathroom. He came out of the bathroom and I looked up the stairs. He just stood there frozen with his eyes bugging out. I thought he was drunk. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Didn't you see that?" I said, "What?" He said, "A woman in a pink sweater just walked by you." I quickly looked around but I didn't see anything. But I knew it was Becky. I had never told my boyfriend that Becky wore a white maid's uniform and a pink cardigan. She wore that pink cardigan all the time. I called my mother and she finally believed me. I forgot to mention my father, grandmother, and sisters went to Becky's funeral. My mother didn't go. She was angry with my father at the time, I guess. Everyone there was under the impression that I was named for Becky. In truth, my mother told me she named me after Becky Thatcher from Tom Sawyer. But I let Becky's family believe that I was named after her. It made them happy. They told me how much Becky loved us. I knew that already, but it was so nice to hear.